The Lost Signals present
I see the gruel is ready.
a celebration of international horror and another Halloween sequel
Michael Myers is outside.
with in-depth analysis,
تو پسر خوب هستی.
adult content, adult language,
Oh my god.
and spoilers.
Сталкеру нельзя входить в комнату.
Join us.
Aren't I lucky I got a chunky bit?
Hello, and welcome back to MOTS-O-Ween 2019 International Edition. My name is Chris Morgan. I'm here with Scott Thurlow and Stephen Ormosi.
Going back to monsters again.
That was more Frankenstein, I guess, than what we're about to do. But why don't you say what it is?
Well, welcome to Monster Island, because we are going to discuss the original classic 1954's Gojira, or as we know in the States, Godzilla, King of the Monsters. And Scott, do you have a logline for us?
I do. It's, of course, that history shows again and again how nature points out the folly of man. Godzilla.
Go.
Go. All right. And Steve-O, would you like to tell us about the plot, please?
Absolutely. So the movie starts off with a ship mysteriously sinking, and then in short order, a bunch of other ships go there for some reason and also
To rescue
get
that
sunk.
one.
Yeah, except for it doesn't work out so well for them. They also get sunk by some mysterious force underneath the water. Eventually, we find out that it is this mythical dinosaur beast, Godzilla, who's been awoken by H-bomb testing under the water. So we start to get actual appearances of Godzilla, and he starts terrorizing the countryside, kind of just knocking things over at first. Eventually,
Tramples a village.
Eventually, humans try to mount an attack against him. At which point, he starts breathing fire.
He's irradiated.
Yeah, and so as we go through the plot, we're basically viewing this through the eyes of a few characters. There's Emiko's kind of she's like at points like the damsel in distress, and at other points like kind of the main character, driving force hero.
She's like the link between other clearly more important characters in terms of the film.
Yeah, because she's kind of like she is the linchpin. She's kind of like she is kind of the narrator, but her dad's the. We'll
talk about that in characters, but I just want to run by these. There's Dr. Yamane, her father, who's a zoologist and really wants to keep Godzilla alive and study him. There's Dr. Serizawa, who is also a scientist who's been working on something that I'm going to mention in a moment. And then there is Ogata, who is Emiko's boyfriend, who's kind of like the standard, like, clean-cut hero type. I think he's in the
Coast Guard, I think, or the Navy or something.
Yeah. So anyway, as we get to this point in the movie where Godzilla seems unstoppable, it turns out that Serizawa has been working on this project where it's called what is it called? The oxygen
destroyer, man. It's simple name. It says what it does on the tin.
It apparently stops. It apparently destroys all oxygen and then destroys all skin and shit because there's no oxygen or something.
Dissolves you to the bone.
Yeah. So he basically says that he'll never use that. And then obviously he is convinced to because Godzilla is unstoppable.
Godzilla threshold has been crossed.
Yeah,
he must use it.
He brings it down into the depths while Godzilla is in the water and uses it, thereby killing himself and wiping out all knowledge of how to use this again so that humanity cannot be tempted to use this horrible weapon again. And that's pretty much the end.
Yep.
Godzilla is also killed.
Yes.
Only to come back in sequels, I guess, as a different Godzilla. They do say, like, right at the end, it's like, I can only assume there are more of these Godzillas.
Yeah, it's like a quick ending narration, right?
If we keep testing H-bombs, more will come.
Well, they retconned it anyways, but I mean, I'm not sure what to give plot because it's strange. Yes, I know this is an iconic movie. It is the king of monster movies, if you will. Use a terrible pun. So, like, the story itself is fine, but just fine. Like, a lot of other stuff, themes certainly we can get into a bit more, we will in a second, but as the story unfolds, as it is presented here, I'm looking at a 2 at best, and I could go down to a 1. Having said the fact that I recognize its importance and so forth to the genre and to pop culture and iconography and so forth as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm gonna go with a pretty strong 2. I agree with you that the plot is just kind of fine, but you see the makings of so many better written plots in it, and like you understand where they come from now. Even like down to the craziest things like that you wouldn't expect. For instance, I saw a bunch of Metal Gear Solid plot in this. Like when I watched it again, I was like, oh yeah, this
Kojima was a fan of
Serizawa guy. Like seems a lot kind of like Otacon, and like especially in the first Metal Gear Solid, and you just see kind of these instances of where this plot has been used before. So I'm going to give it a little leg up because of that. I was probably would have given it a 2 anyway, but I'll give it a little bit of a stronger 2. Because
I don't know.
All right. I'm actually going to give this a 3. I know that's a little surprise, but this actually is one of these films.
Would you say it's a little surprise or no surprise?
This is no surprise. I might have been sarcastic there. No. The reason is when I first saw this as a kid, what happened is this was released in Japan, and when they brought it back to America, they actually got a noir writer to adapt it for American audiences, which is why they like inserted Raymond Burr in the middle of it, which is pretty hilarious. But actually, I hadn't seen the original Japanese one until about 15 years ago.
Yeah,
when it was actually restored and released. And watching it as an adult and watching it I've seen it. This is like third time I've seen it. It's really interesting watching how the science goes. From the initial discovery, and I guess we have the sunk cost fallacy at the beginning of this because they keep sending boats out there.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm just kind of amazed. Like, it's kind of like looking back at Star Trek now. It's just like, well, you got more science right than I thought you did, But
Some
I mean,
of it, I
a
guess.
lot we're going to get to when it comes to themes. But I was kind of interesting watching the bureaucracy then, watching the bureaucracy now. And there was a film release that actually won the Japanese Best Picture, which was Shin Godzilla, and that was basically told from the whole
And the guy
point
from
of like
Neon Genesis
Ima.
did that one.
Yeah. And so, I mean, to me, I did like, I saw as you said, the genesis of a lot of stuff here. And I thought it was much more mature film than I had even recognized it 15 years ago or something. So I'm giving it a lot of credit in that regard. And it also really made me want to see Rashomon again. So I'm gonna.
All right, there you go.
I mean, I guess, yeah, I'm fine with the 2. Yes, you're right. Like, of course, its influence cannot be denied and is everywhere. At least a large portion of things like this. So, and yeah, right. The story itself, narratively, is fine, and it may not be the most fulfilling or fleshed out of ones, but yes, like I said, the ripples extend, and I think you're right. For what is there in its original form, I think it's enough to give it a 2 for me.
Okay, so I think that's 2 2s and a 3.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
And it's to me with themes, correct? Yeah.
I don't know. You're the one keeping track.
No, I am. And the themes are without question the strongest part, and I think, and the themes are why I actually gave it a 3, because it is this unfolding of events. How they discover it. Starts off as a legend, and then we're starting things we can't ignore. Like there's the troglodyte in there, and the footprints have radioactivity on them, and the whole thing. And put this in a historic context. This film was released 9 years after Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Sure, of course.
And the whole thing about Godzilla is he is walking radiation. So, after the attack, they were using the Geiger counter on the people who were closest to Godzilla. It's really funny because I was noticing last night that until he's attacked, Godzilla's kind of like this lumbering.
I mean, he's an animal, as we mentioned in the previous cast, I believe. Like, it just does what it's going to do.
It is going to do what it's going to do. And I thought the whole thing with Serizawa was interesting because here we are, we destroyed something from the atomic age with a biological or chemical weapon that he then stopped, that he died with. Because it also harkens back to the scientists who, worked in the Manhattan Project how nuclear weapons came out of science, like good intentions spawned all this thing. I mean, there was a German scientist who launched that rocket who said, my rocket did well, it just landed on the wrong planet, meaning because, so there's a lot to unpack here, and I highly, but I'm going to say that the themes are extremely effective. I mean, they, the more I see it, the more I watch the bureaucracies that they go through, the more relevant it is. Like, God, bureaucracies never fucking change. So I'm giving this a very, very strong one.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, like, I think the big one is there were clear parallels. They're dealing with the aftermath of culture, if, a horrifying weapon used in real life, in a real life war, and, like, exploring the ramifications of that. And that, I think, is one of the bigger legacies, of course, of Godzilla, and what it means in terms of entertainment media. So yeah, man, like, and this might go to the style, but there was certainly a little, like, a segment where, like, it's again in the film, very clear parallel to the victims of the actual bombing, like in the aftermath of the Godzilla attack on Tokyo. So yeah, that was all very well handled, and yes, it's undeniably there. And I think, of course, like, it's important to remember / recognize that they were exploring that kind of thing. Yes, through a, like, sort of ridiculous, like, monster, but still, like, it was obviously a metaphor as well. It's a monster and a metaphor.
It's a force
at the same time. Yeah. So I think, yeah, you're right, Chris. Like, I get why you gave it a 3 on plot, but I think, like, I'm putting, of course I'm giving it a 1, a very strong 1 here because of that very fact, because of how it does handle that stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think one of the most fascinating discussions in this film is where they are talking about whether or not to use a weapon of mass destruction in Japan 9 years after, like, right, the bombs were dropped, and coming to that decision, ultimately ending up doing it, and then trying to destroy any trace of being able to do it again.
Replicate it. Yeah.
I think it's a really, I think they're trying to somewhat rationalize why it happened to them, but at the same time saying, like, we would never let that happen to other people, or I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I think that's a really fascinating thing. And
I think you can take a lot of angles because it's like nuanced enough.
Yeah, and I thought that the discussion in this film was really good, but I did want to bring up, like, there's this really interesting topic about that I was reading about. It was basically like, look, there's a reason that the U.S. around this time, the early to late 50s, was making irradiated superheroes, and Japan was making irradiated monsters.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And, like, there is that whole juxtaposition of, like, you've got, all these superheroes on the U.S. side, and, like, their superpowers being, like, for good, and then you see the view of radiation from Japan being a massive force of destruction. Yeah. And yeah, I always kind of liked that argument. I thought that was really interesting, so I figured I'd mention it here. But yeah, it's going to be a very strong one. Themes for Godzilla. Yeah,
that's an excellent point. I
mean, there's a lot of stuff
thought about that,
done about that, but yeah. Cool angle.
Yeah, very cool angle. And Scott, would you like to discuss the antagonist with
So it
us?
actually sort of ties into what Steve was just mentioning, right? Like, of course it's Godzilla, but again, via, like, he's just a physical manifestation of, again, as I somewhat these thought humorously reference, like, the folly of man, right? Like, inventing world-destroying weapons, or these civilization-destroying weapons, then, like, creating something worse beyond that, and then having to use one against the other. And again, tying back into themes. So yeah, like, within the film, they address that for sure. But of course, like, you see Godzilla smashing stuff. Like, it's fucking up the whole country. Like, I don't tell you. So, like, it's both at once, I think. Like, it's entertaining on one surface, like, spectacle value for sure. And also, like, again, the more metaphorical / nebulous, philosophical thought behind it. So I think they're both very effective and presented well enough in the film. Yeah, it's a guy in a rubber suit. Like, I don't know what I'm going to tell you. It's 1954, but it still actually looks pretty good, which I'll mention in style, especially some of the set pieces and stuff. But I think, of course, it's something they haven't dealt with before. It's something that science and or nature collided, and now you have to deal with some unforeseen disaster. So yeah, I think it's very effective and still is to this day.
Yeah, I think that's one of the strongest. Outside of theme, I think that's one of the strongest parts of the movie.
I think they're pretty closely tied, is all I'm saying, too.
Yeah, well, that is exactly what it is. Like, the idea that it's a monster is kind of half baked, right? Like the antagonist of this story is what set that monster free, and that is, closely tied into the themes. But yeah, so I got to give it credit for that, and I'm going to give it a 1.
Excellent. And Steve-O, would you like to talk about the protagonist?
Sure. So I guess it is Ogata or Serizawa, or maybe, I don't know. There's
Scooby-Doo and the Godzilla Hunters.
There's basically 4 characters in this. I think
it.
you could make an argument for each of them. Although it, like, I think we follow each of their stories separately at given points in this movie. So I'm not sure who I would per se give it to, if not all of them right now. I think they all do a decent job, although they're mostly probably forgettable, like in the main thrust of things.
Kind
like
of.
I don't really. It's not like every single one of these characters except for Serizawa are completely pointless to the greater Godzilla is destroying the country.
The professor is kind of helpful. Like, he's relevant as well.
I understand.
Old professor.
I mean, like, he doesn't do anything. He just doesn't stop him from. It doesn't stop Godzilla from doing anything. He doesn't affect him.
He gives
in
him
any way.
information. I'm saying he does his research. Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
some pushback on.
He's our window into knowing what is going on. Basically, he's our exposition.
He's Michael
man.
Crichton, scientist guy.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because he does provide the exposition.
I'll accept that.
He provides the context, and you have got Serizawa. So it's. I understand now why Emiko has all these. Is it Emiko? Emiko has all these relationships, and why she is the linchpin. Because in a way, I can see an argument for all 4 of them being the protagonist, and an argument for her being the protagonist because without her, these would be disparate elements that would never interact.
Right.
Yeah, she's a contrived catalyst, like, for sure. Like, that's what I'm going to say. Like, yeah, she's a fine character, but, I know him. He's my father, and it's my boyfriend, and I know the other scientist guy, like, right?
The other guy is my fiance.
Yeah. Like, sure, she is a vehicle to connect them all, so, like, they have a reason to, like, encounter each other. But I'm going to argue for, having said that, I think it's all, or 3. It's her and Ogatu and her father, the professor. Mm. And I think Serizawa, eye patch professor guy, oxygen destroyer guy, he's a secondary character. By far the most important one, for sure.
I'd say by far the most important character in this movie.
Possibly, yeah. I'll agree with that even. But I don't think I lump him into protagonist category, is what I'm saying. Okay. But I will lump the other 3 because you follow more of them. Like, there's one shot of Saragata or whatever earlier. Serizawa earlier. Oxygen destroyer, man. And that's it. I was like, why would they cut to that shot of a dude with an eye patch? And then, of course, it makes sense later when they go to him and find out. But that's not
because you're supposed to remember him because he has an eye patch.
That's not till like 60% further through the film. Yeah. So all I'm saying is, in my mind, the way I cut it up is the 3 of them and him as a secondary, and all 3 of them are like good. They're good enough. The relationships are believable enough, and they tug you along with the plot. So I'll give them a fine 1.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think that. Actually, I think you're right. He doesn't really come into play until a lot further into the movie.
He has an arc. Again, maybe the best one, but...
Well, like, he's the only one that really matters to any of the Godzilla shit. Like,
actually, Scott, I like a lot that using them as the 3 of them as the protagonist. I think that's great.
They probably share like roughly an equal amount of time in the film. You know what I mean? Like, and they cut this and that.
Yeah,
and they're doing this one, blah blah blah.
And they stand between the dichotomy that is Serizawa and Godzilla. Yeah,
and that ties back in the themes. But again, it's a good trio there. But I am gonna, I think, come down on that being they all get credit here.
Yeah. So did you say you're giving them all a 1?
Yeah, like collectively. Yeah.
Chris?
Yeah, I'm going to give him 1. Mm-hmm.
I am going to... I'm going to say that you're right. Serizawa is a secondary character, and saying that, I'm going to give him a 0 because I don't...
That's fine.
Like,
you're going to give the protagonist...
I'm not going to remember any of these characters anywhere near as much as Serizawa or Godzilla. Like, they all fade into the background of this movie, maybe by necessity... because of their characters, but still, that being said, I'm going to give it a 0 for...
No, I get it. I don't begrudge it, and maybe, is it a softer 0 perhaps, but still a 0 nonetheless? Yeah.
Okay. I got you. And Is it Steve-O?
I don't know. Again, this is your job.
No. I know.
You had one job.
No, I just did protagonist.
You did protagonist. No. I have the supporting. I'm sorry. I'm looking at my paper right now, and I've got the.
Just go on.
Okay, so to me, it's supporting characters, and yeah, I am definitely going to say Serizawa is the most important supporting character.
Are there any other supporting characters other than like background, like
no,
officers and stuff?
No, it's really funny because I walked into this thinking, okay, well, we got 4 protagonists and 0 supporting characters, but that was a really good observation you made. And I think his importance is that the fact that you've got Godzilla, this force of nature, it was actually a product of what Serizawa is. Like, he embodies the end result of so it is kind of, it is
a lot of themes flow through his character, for sure.
It is kind of like a Mobius strip where he comes back to,
I like that.
So basically he is the dawn of maybe the next Godzilla, and you've got the scientist that's looking backwards. So it really is a well-balanced film. If you take Godzilla and what he represents as the antagonist more, and then you take Serizawa and what he represents as a supporting character, and then you've got the protagonist right in the middle. It's a really good, it's well balanced, and the whole movie, the more we're deconstructing it, the more it really just the themes keep making themselves more prominent. So with that, I'm going to give Serizawa a 1.
Yeah, I mean, I just made the argument for it, and I think you added on to, but exactly why? To me, it was obvious upon watching. Like, that's how I cut it up. So. And that's definitely why I'm giving it a 1.
Completely agree. I mean, that's, as I said, I think he's the only important human in this movie outside of exposition and like explaining what's going on and a reason. Like, so you had Yamane, who was there to explain what was happening to the audience. You had Emiko and Ogata. Emiko was there to like connect everybody, and Ogata was there to. I guess his only reason he was there was to convince Serizawa to.
He's supposed to be like the heroic, like front man, sort of.
He basically needed a devil on his shoulder to convince him to use the fucking weapon, and that was this guy who is his rival. Whatever. So I'm going to give Serizawa a 1. I think that he is super important to this film, and that's it.
I mean, it's really funny because now that you say it, it's like. Ogata is, as a Coast Guard, is a member of the Coast Guard. So you've got the military perspective.
He represents that, like, more or less.
So, he's
like, again, like the chiseled face of this film.
Yeah.
And you've got the scientist who wants to be pure, and it's a great dynamic they have here. I really have to say. And Scott, it is to you with dialogue.
Oh, wonderful. I'm not sure what I'm probably looking at a 0. It's, again, Steve-O sort of just quickly mentioned the first thing I was going to bring up is like, yeah, it has to be a lot of exposition. They have to explain Godzilla and the myth and the science of it all. Even if some of it makes no fucking sense, it doesn't actually matter. But again, we've run into this problem with like non-horror films earlier in the season. Like sometimes, maybe it's just the fault of translation, but it feels very flat and stilted, and like can't really get around that. There's no avoiding it. Again, maybe if we spoke and understood better, or any Japanese and fluently, it would be a different case. But since that is not. I have to only go by what I can read, and I think I'm stealing this from you, Steve-O. You said this on some other one recently-ish, that, like, it's just there to connect everything. It's nothing really stand out. Maybe the speech where, like, the speech he gives at the end, where he's like, oh, and there might be more Godzillas or whatever, like, right? So, like, that's fine, but it's nowhere near enough to outweigh, like, just the connected dialogue to get you from point A to point B to point C.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of this is, like, really, it's either, as I mentioned before, like, somewhat bland exposition or like overly emotional, like overplayed, screaming at each other a lot of times, which is fine, I guess, but it doesn't make for a great screenplay dialogue a lot of times. And yeah, I mean, the dialogue was serviceable, but it wasn't great. I think I'm probably also going to give it a 0. It got me from the beginning to the end. And everything else was, I thought, probably better than the dialogue in this film. So
it's functional at best, so just a weaker part of it.
Yeah, I'm going to say it's functional. But I'm going to say the one bit of dialogue, and I pointed this out to Steve and Beth when we watched it the other night, that really got me the first time I saw it. We knew. And there's a woman, they set it up clutching her kids when Godzilla comes to town. And as they come back to her once or twice. And then right when he's there, she's like, come, we're going to be joining your father again.
Yeah, I
soon.
remember that. You're right. That was a nice moment and touching for sure.
No, but
surrounded by a sea of mediocrity.
No, I'm not. I'm going to give dialogue a 0 too for all the reasons you guys say.
Right. It's punctuated by some moments here and there of peace and stuff like that.
But this is the best way I can work that in because once again, because one of the things that they do with the dialogue is they do mention Nagasaki. They do mention the war and that Serizawa lost his eye in the war.
Yeah.
I'm going to say I agree with you, even for bureaucratic stuff. The dialogue's dry, but I would be remiss if I didn't point out that there were these little punctuations where they did have the characters really
elevated itself at those sparse moments.
Yeah, they gave it some gravitas. They gave it some emotional gravitas is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, that scene definitely was, and it wasn't. That was one of the few times where they didn't overstate the acting,
right.
And it was just like kind of her cowering with her kids saying like, "Oh, we're gonna go see Daddy soon," which is a really intense thing to be saying.
It's dark. It's dark as hell. But like they're depicting that was during like the parallels to the actual attack.
Right.
So.
Right. Absolutely. So yep, zeros all around for dialogue.
Yeah. And Steve-O, it is to you as style. So
I was actually impressed with the style of this movie, especially for a guy walking around in a rubber suit and like the clearly small budget for effects that they had and all they were able to, get their hands on at the time. I thought that everything was kind of worked into the style of the movie pretty well. And nothing looked awful except for Godzilla's fire breath or whatever.
Well, don't forget the jets with the jets on the suspicion.
Oh, yeah. But even that looked fine. It didn't look awful.
Listen, what do you expect? Like, that's the whole thing, right? Like, they're working with what they had at the time and with the budget that they were able to get. So I'll say this: like, some of the lighting looked really sweet. Like, that was cool. I noticed that.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you're familiar again with the miniature model sets and being smashed to pieces by a dude in a suit. Like, but it's still like it's just enough to like for you to like suspend your disbelief. And again, like all the regular shots and stuff, like when just a bunch of people in a room, like doing a bureaucratic thing, like that was framed fine. Like, I no complaints there. And there's a wonderful piece of the Godzilla theme that arises, every time he shows up, every time someone's about to do something heroic. Like it was always like, it always fit right in there and it was nice to hear. So like, yeah, like again, you have to take it for what it is with the practical things they were doing. But other than that, I think it's a good looking film.
I agree. You did mention one thing when I saw you at work the other day, and you mentioned the music. And one thing that I want to say is
that for you, yeah.
there was one scene in particular because I grew up with the Godzilla theme. It's in everything. It's always wonderful. But
another iconic thing. Sure.
Yeah, but the one thing that actually convinced Serizawa which is, I think, a beautiful scene, is where they have the girls' choir. Yeah, singing that lamentation.
True. Again, that was a well done, more nuanced, subdued, emotional part.
Yeah,
you're right.
The only, in the music and the words and they took a long time with that. It was like a good minute and a half or two where they're doing this, and Serizawa at the end of it's like saying, "Okay, I'll do it, but I'm destroying all my work."
And me.
And yeah, well,
sure.
Yeah, he kept that ace out of his sleeve. But for all the things you said,
I mean, he did say, even if I destroy all my notes, it'll still be in my head. Yeah. So clearly, you knew he was going to do something.
It was very heavily foreshadowed. If not outright stated.
What I meant is he kept that away, ace in deck from them. But yeah, I'm going to give Style a very strong one. I thought that musical scene was incredibly effective.
Yeah, good call.
Completely agree. The music was great throughout. I wanted to leave that part to you.
Oh, thanks.
For sure. There you go. Definitely strong one. This and themes still stronger, if you will, but style and themes, I think stand out to me.
Yeah, it is a really well constructed movie, and it is coming. Do you have anything to say on Style?
No.
So it is coming to me with a recommendation, and I think we've gone over like how really well constructed this movie is. Thematically, it is unfortunately just as relevant. We don't have the personal experience of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but we do have the parables that are unfortunately continuing until this very day.
Got Godzillas of our own in our modern age.
because we live in a world of morons. But yeah, I'm going to give it a
It's
very
true now as it was then.
exactly. The bureaucratic mentality,
Morons and monsters is the word.
the monsters and the
Anyway.
bureaucratic mentality. I'm going to strongly recommend this. I think it is. I think it is a really important film in terms of cinema. It is also in terms of themes, and as we said, empirically, it is a really well constructed movie. So I'm going to give it a 1.
Yeah, man. It still stands, as Chris pretty much said. I definitely would recommend it. Again, it's influential, as I mentioned, and its tendrils, like Godzilla's wake, if you will, his footprint is large upon pop culture. But yeah, it's not like you can't go back and enjoy this one, because you totally can, and I think we just told you why.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a good movie. It's still watchable. It can get a little dry at points, but it's definitely worth a watch.
Overall.
And it's an interesting look at where, Japanese culture was at that time, so shortly after the war and all that stuff. So it's a really cool time capsule type of movie, along with just a good old monster movie that you can throw on and watch. So yeah, I'm gonna recommend it for sure.
Excellent. Well, and we all right. Well, Scott gave it a 9, and basically we all said
I should have given it an 8.
no. Sorry. I gave it a 9. You gave it an 8. We all definitely saw that dialogue was the driest part of
Steve will
this.
give it overall.
And Steve-O gave it a 7, and I gave it a 9, which
Okay.
gives us an aggregate score of 8.
Yeah,
That is right.
that actually is spot on, I would say. Godzilla, 8's a fine score from us.
Yeah.
Or Gojira, if you will.
Yeah. So yeah, we did. Again, definitely go back, check this movie out. Unfortunately, we'll have to look at the themes they're still alive and well today. Unfortunately, but unless anybody has anything else to say, I'm going to say good night. I've been Chris Morgan here with Scott Thurlow
I will turn to my prehistoric cave.
and Stephen Hermosi.
And I'm going to find King Kong now.
Arigato.
See you next time.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.